Right, so we're going to take a look at the Edexcel Paper 2 from 2016. So we're going to look at section A, which is the short answer questions and multiple choice. So on the left hand side, I've got the question paper, and on the right hand side, the mark scheme. So we can take a look at how the marks are awarded. So if we look at the first question, define the term national income. So they have said it's total spending on goods and services. You could say it was total income, but total spending on goods and services is the answer that they're accepting, but it's not the only thing that you can give. There are other things. And this is the thing about the mark schemes. The mark scheme doesn't include absolutely every single possible answer. So it might be that you've given an answer, but you would still get marks for it, even if it's not on the mark scheme. So it does make it a little bit tricky to mark yourself if you're not too sure. Right, B is a multiple choice. So which of the following is an injection into the circular flow of income? Well, your circular flow of income, you may remember, is how money flows between households and firms, and you have injections into the circular flow and you have withdrawals out of the circular flow. Your injections are government spending, investment and exports, because that's new money coming into the UK, and your withdrawals are taxation, saving and imports. So the answer to that question would be investment. So this is linked, part C is linked to part B, define the circular flow of income. Now most people know what the circular flow of income is, but are not quite so sure about how to define it or how to describe it. So it's the way money flows around around the economy between households and firms, as in that little diagram above. So that's the first part, and then the second part is where you would just give an example of an injection or give an example of a withdrawal. Now it might not occur to you to do that, and that's why it's important to practice exam papers, because it gives you an idea of the sorts of things they're wanting. So it's not just about it being a circular flow of income, but they want you to identify the fact that you've got some injections, you've got some withdrawals. So if you look over the right hand side, it says money flowing between households, and there is also withdrawals from circular flow. So that's one option for a mark. You could say injections, give an example of injections. You could give an example of withdrawal. So there's different ways of getting those marks. Right, so the next question is defining purchasing power parities. Okay, so what we've got here is your GDP per capita. That's the first part. GDP per capita means GDP per person. So that's where you take the GDP of a country and divide it by the population. And then what happens is if you're comparing between countries, that number that you get is converted into dollars. So it says here US dollars. And then sometimes they do a further conversion into dollars at PPP, which stands for purchasing power parities. Now, purchasing power parity takes into account the fact that the cost of living in countries is different. Different countries are different. So, for example, the cost of living in India is a lot lower than the cost of living in the UK. So, for somebody in the UK, £100 perhaps won't go very far. In India, maybe £50 would buy you the same basket of goods. So if you're working out purchasing power parity, what you're doing is you're thinking, what is the basket of goods going to cost in the UK, and what is that same basket of goods going to cost in India? And if it was £100 in the UK and £50 in India, then you would say that the purchasing power parity exchange rate was £100 is equal to, well, obviously that would not be £50, would it? It would be in rupees, but it'd be £100 is equal to however many rupees that basket of goods was. So you've got 2 marks for that definition. So you need to be talking about how it's reflects the purchasing powers, or we shouldn't really use the same term that's in the question. So it's reflecting the cost of living in different countries. So if we have a look at the mark scheme, again, they've given you lots of different possible answers. It's saying it making a comparison between countries is calling it a partial definition. For a full definition, the rate at which the currency of one country would be converted into another country to buy the same basket of goods and services. It doesn't matter if you use a lot more words than that and you don't explain it quite as succinctly as that, but if you get the idea that you could explain that you take a basket of goods in the UK, the same basket of goods in another country, and you put those 2 currencies equal to each other to get your exchange rate. That's probably the simplest way of thinking about it. Right, the next one, the Office of National Statistics estimates the UK population was 64 million in 2013. Using the data, what was the UK's total GDP in 2013? So in 2013, we've got, let's just circle that in blue, that was our average per person. So you need to multiply 38,500 by 64 million. Now, one thing I would say to watch out for is the units. Luckily, here it says million and here it says million, but sometimes they do try and catch you out, and they might have put some zeros on there and put millions as the answer, or done it the other way around. So just watch out for millions, billions, etc. So if you do that calculation, you should get answer A as your correct answer. Right, the next one, diagram A shows the aggregate demand and aggregate supply for a country. Illustrate actual economic growth on diagram A. So on this axis here, we've got real output. So if output increases, that means you have got economic growth. So if we shift the aggregate demand curve to the right, then our real GDP goes from Y1 to Y2, which means that we've got economic growth. You could also do that by shifting the aggregate supply curve. It's going to be the same principle. If we look at this diagram here, if we shift the aggregate supply curve to the right, we're also going to get an increase in real GDP, which means we're getting economic growth. Okay, so the next one is about the different measures of unemployment. So we've got 2 measures of unemployment. The first one is the claimant count, which is the one they're asking you about. The other measure, just for reference, is the ILO survey. That's the other way of measuring unemployment. So define the claimant count. Well, that's simply the number of people claiming benefits. So it says the number of people claiming unemployment benefit or job seekers allowance. The next one, calculate the percentage change in the claimant count from August 2014 to February 2015. So 2014, February 2015. So that's where you work out the change. So it's going to be 961,149, 858,344. That's going to be your change over your original 961,149, and then you multiply all of that by 100, and you should get minus 10.7%. Make sure you remember the minus sign, and make sure you remember the percentage sign as well. Right, next one, which one of the following is likely to cause a reduction in the claimant count? So what is going to cause fewer people to claim benefits? Now, you could think about, some people think that an increase in the size of the workforce is the correct answer, because you think if more people are working, fewer people are unemployed. But maybe more people are working because you've got more people coming from abroad and they are taking the jobs. So that's why C is not the correct answer, because it doesn't say whether or not it's UK workers taking the jobs or people from abroad. So the correct answer is actually B, a compulsory weekly interview for every claimant. And the reason why it's B is because if people claiming benefits have to go for an interview, then they are less likely to claim the benefits because it's more hassle for them. It's too much like hard work, so they will possibly not bother claiming the benefits unless they actually need the money. Right, number 4, there's a lot going on this graph. It looks very confusing, so it's one of those that would be much better if it was in colour so that you could identify what's going on. So let's have a look at this. So this one here, that's this one here, this is balance of trade in services. This is for the UK. So what this means is when we talk about services, so for example banking, that means that we've got a positive balance of trade in services because all of these are greater than 0. So when it says balance of trade, that means exports minus imports. So what that means, if we've got more exports of services than imports of services. And then we've got the balance of trade in goods, that's this one here. So what's happening here is negative, so that means we have more imports of goods. So we've got more imports of goods, but we've got more exports of services. The dotted line, sorry, that was the cat. The dotted line is balance of total UK trade. So what they're doing there is working out the difference between the goods and the services. And the balance of trade is this dotted line here. And this is where it's quite confusing. So if we just take a look at this point here, well, it's not really easy to see in yellow, this point here where you're at 0, what that means is trade in goods is equal to the trade in services. So the two of them, because it's more or less 0, isn't it? It might not be quite 0, but it's very close to 0. So the trade in goods and the trade in services is pretty much the same. If we take, say, this point here, that's the lowest point. What's happening here is that's where you've got the biggest difference between the two. This point here, then, that's kind of a middling kind of point, and we'll come to that when we look at the answers. So if we look at the answers, the first one says the total UK trade deficit was the largest in June 2013. Well, June 2013 is the first one that I've circled, and actually we've not got a trade deficit at all. We've got a balance. We've got a balance there, so it's definitely not A. B, the trade in goods was always in surplus. Well, the trade in goods was actually always negative. It was always a deficit. C says the total UK trade deficit was the smallest in January 14. So January 14 is this one here. Well, no, that's actually where it's the biggest. And then D, the trade in goods deficit was the smallest in June 2013. That's here. That one, the first one that I've circled. So the trade in goods deficit was this. Oh no, trade in goods deficit. Yes, the trade in goods deficit is the bit at the bottom, and it's smallest in June 2013. So June 2013, just trying to home in on that. Yeah, June 2013. Oh yeah, that's this one here. So what we're saying is that is the deficit, and that's a smaller deficit than, say, here. That's the bigger deficit. So we're seeing how far we're going negative. So this is the smallest negative for the goods. If you put your ruler on, I've put so many markings on here, it's difficult to see now. But if you put your ruler on, that's the smallest trade in goods deficit. So D is the correct answer. Right, so explain one likely reason for the reduction in total UK trade deficit. So why has the UK trade deficit fallen? Well, we need to think about what that actually means. So for the trade deficit to fall, a deficit, remember, is where imports are perhaps bigger than exports. What you need for the deficit to fall is for exports to increase and for imports to decrease. So exports increase, imports decrease. Now there's lots of different reasons that this could happen, and one of those things could be a change in the exchange rate. So if the value of the pound were to fall, what that would mean is that exports are now cheaper. So that leads to an increase in demand for exports. Increase in demand for exports, I'm running out of space. And imports are more expensive. So that's going to lead to a fall in demand for imports. Okay, so that would then mean that the trade deficit is going to reduce, or it's going to improve. If we look at the mark scheme, sorry about that. She's brought her meat upstairs to eat it with me. She likes to walk around making a funny noise with her meat in her mouth. So if we look at the mark scheme answer over here, it's giving you various reasons. It says falling oil price, reducing cost of imports. It's not the easiest one to write about. Perhaps this one would be a good one. A improvement in quality of UK exports. So if UK exports improve in quality, there'd be greater demand for the UK exports, and that would then improve the trade balance. Here we've got our depreciation of the exchange rate. And it says relatively lower inflation in the UK. So if inflation in the UK was lower than inflation in other countries, then what you're going to find is UK goods are relatively cheaper, so there'll be more demand for UK goods. Now, a key thing that you have to do with these questions, which I didn't do originally, is the application. Edexcel are really keen on application. So what that means is you don't just do your explanation, which is what I did. You need to throw in some numbers. So it says here 1 mark for use of data from the figure, e.g. Now you don't have to use that particular data, but you've got to use something. So the trade deficit was approximately 1 billion in January. So what they've done is they've taken this here, and they've said January 2015. Where's January 2015? That's the end of the time. So they said the trade deficit is approximately 1 billion. That's that point there in January 2015. The question is saying reason for the reduction in total trade deficit. So what's happening is this bit here is where the trade deficit is reducing. So you could say in December 2014 to January 2015, the trade deficit has fallen. Or you could give a number, but you need to put something in from that chart. And then we've got another 3 mark question. So this is on the multiplier. So just to give you the formula for the multiplier, K is equal to 1 over 1 minus marginal propensity to consume. And to recap on what it means by the multiplier is if you have an injection into the circular flow of income, remember our circular flow of income from one of the earlier questions, what you're going to get is you're going to get a bigger increase in national income. So if you had an injection of, say, 100, the increase in national income might be, for example, 300. If it were 300, then that's because the multiplier, which is K, is equal to 3. So what you do is you take your injection, you work out the value of your multiplier, and then you times the value of the multiplier by your injection to get your final increase in national income. So if we have a look at this question here, the Bank of England estimates the marginal propensity to consume to be 0.5. So K is equal to 1 over 1 minus 0.5. And then it says the Chancellor and the Exchequer announced a 15 billion investment. So we need to do 1 over 1 minus 0.5. So if you don't have a calculator, I always like to do these without a calculator if possible, that's 1 over a half, which you turn upside down and multiply, so 1 over 2 over 1, which is 2. So the value of the multiplier is 2. The injection is 15. So 15 times by the value of the multiplier is going to give you 30. And remember what I said about one of the other questions, watch out for your units, it's billion. So make sure you put 30 billion there as your answer. And then part B, which one of the following is most likely to cause a rightward shift of the aggregate supply curve? So a rightward shift of the aggregate supply curve means you go from AS1 to AS2. So falling cost of production is an example of something that shifts the aggregate supply curve. We don't have falling cost of production there, but we do have something which is similar, which is an increase in productivity. An increase in productivity will lead to a falling cost of production. So D is your correct answer. So that's section A, and it's good to practice some section A's. They're nice short questions, and the mark scheme is reasonably straightforward to answer. So section B does require you to read quite a lot of extracts before you can answer the questions. So section B is where you've got your sort of slightly longer questions and you've got your extracts that you need to read, and then you've got your essays where you've got a choice of 2 essays and you do one of those essays.